It was the 2nd of August, 216 BC. 86,000 men, a river of iron and bronze, marched onto a dusty plain in southern Italy with one purpose: to find Hannibal Barca and erase him from the face of the earth. Facing them, Hannibal's patchwork army of mercenaries was outnumbered almost 2-1. By sunset, more than 50,000 of those Romans would be dead or dying, slaughtered in one of the most perfect tactical victories in military history. This is the story of how that was possible. It's the story of how one man's mind engineered a perfect trap, and how the most powerful army in the world was convinced to walk right into its jaws. To understand the catastrophe at Cannae, you have to understand the terror that had gripped Rome. For 2 years, Hannibal Barca had been a phantom of destruction. He had done the impossible, marching his army from Spain across the frozen Alps and descending into Italy like an avalanche. The Romans, expecting a war fought elsewhere, were caught completely off guard. They threw armies at him, confident their legions could dispense with this invader. They were wrong. He had met them before, and he had broken them before. At the Ticinus River, a cavalry skirmish turned into a sharp Roman defeat. Then, at the Trebia, his superior horsemen shattered a full consular army in the bitter cold. Each loss was a blow not just to Rome's manpower, but to its pride and its belief in its own supremacy. But the true national trauma came the following year, in 217 BC, at Lake Trasimene. It was there that Hannibal staged one of the largest and most successful ambushes in history. Hiding his entire army in the morning mist, he waited as a Roman army marched blindly into a narrow defile between the hills and the water. Pinned and panicked, 15,000 Romans were destroyed, many driven into the lake to drown in their armor. The news sent a shockwave of grief and fear through the city of Rome itself. After this disaster, Rome turned to Quintus Fabius Maximus, a man with an answer so alien to their nature, it was almost unthinkable. Appointed dictator, Fabius understood a truth his predecessors had paid for in blood. Hannibal was simply too brilliant to be fought in a conventional, pitched battle. So he began a new and deeply un-Roman strategy of attrition, shadowing Hannibal's army, but always refusing a major fight. But to the Roman people, this looked like cowardice. They watched in fury as Hannibal's army roamed across Italy, plundering their countryside without consequence. This was not the Roman way, built on facing enemies head-on and crushing them. Fabius's caution felt like a stain. Hannibal, a master of psychology, expertly fanned these flames of dissent, pointedly ordering his men to spare Fabius's personal estates to create the public illusion of treason. This fury boiled over into the consular elections of 216 BC, producing a command dangerously divided against itself. Lucius Aemilius Paullus, a cautious and experienced patrician, saw the wisdom in Fabius's approach. His co-consul, Gaius Terentius Varro, was an arrogant, reckless populist who had won his office by promising to destroy Hannibal in one glorious, decisive battle. It was a political backlash against pragmatism, driven by wounded pride. Then Hannibal made his move. He seized the massive Roman supply depot at the town of Cannae, placing himself between the advancing legions and their own source of grain. It was a strategic dare that the rash consul Varro could not resist. He had not just found an overconfident enemy, he had meticulously engineered one. The showdown was now inevitable. The army that marched to answer that dare was a monolith of iron and discipline, the largest Rome had ever fielded. The legionary was a formidable soldier, trained to use his heavy shield and short sword to batter his way through any opposition. But this army had a fatal flaw: its command. Roman custom demanded the two consuls alternate command daily, meaning the army swung between extreme caution and reckless aggression. Facing this monolith was Hannibal's army, a mosaic of cultures, a brotherhood of mercenaries, forged into a cohesive fighting force by years of campaigning. It was a smaller force of 50,000 Libyans, Spaniards, Gauls, and Numidians. Unlike the Romans, these men were loyal personally to Hannibal, who had spent 2 years in Italy studying his enemy. But here's what historians often overlook. His elite Libyan infantry, the very troops who would form the jaws of his trap, were armed with captured Roman armor and weapons, a calculated act of psychological warfare. On the morning of August 2nd, the battlefield itself was already an enemy to the Romans. Hannibal had chosen his ground with incredible care. The rising August sun glared into Roman eyes. A hot, seasonal wind blew clouds of dust and grit into their faces, choking them and obscuring their vision. Hannibal's formation was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, designed to look weak and invite the very attack the Romans were desperate to make. In the center, he placed his least reliable troops, the Gauls and Spaniards, and pushed them forward in a convex crescent, an arc bulging towards the Romans. This was the bait. On the flanks, held back slightly, he placed his best troops, the veteran, Roman-equipped Libyan infantry. They were the jaws of the trap. As his officers gazed at the sea of Roman shields, one of them, a man named Gisgo, muttered in awe at their astonishing numbers. Hannibal, overhearing him, replied with a serious face, "There is one thing, Gisgo, yet more astonishing. In all those great numbers before us, there is not one man called Gisgo." The unexpected jest sent waves of confident laughter through his ranks. In a single human moment, he had transformed his army's anxiety into a feeling of profound contempt for the enemy. The men were ready. The battle began not with a roar, but with a shattering crash on the wings. On Hannibal's left, his heavy cavalry under Hasdrubal smashed the outnumbered Roman horsemen against the river. On the other flank, his nimble Numidians executed a brilliant holding action, swirling around the allied cavalry, refusing a direct engagement but keeping them fixed in place. They were holding the door to the trap open. In the center, the great Roman hammer fell. A wall of shields, 70,000 men deep, surged forward like a glacier, crashing into the thin, bulging line of Gauls and Spaniards. The sound was tremendous. As Hannibal had planned, his center began to give way under the relentless Roman pressure. For the Roman soldiers, this was exactly what they expected. Victory felt certain. But they couldn't see the bigger picture. The line was not breaking. It was bending. The crescent that had bulged outwards was now caving in, turning from a convex curve into a deadly concave pocket. The Roman legions, focused only on the retreating enemy, pressed deeper into this growing sack. Their own momentum drove them into the trap, their formation becoming so compressed that soldiers could barely lift their arms. Then, at the moment of maximum Roman penetration, Hannibal gave the signal. The jaws of the trap snapped shut. On both sides of the overextended Roman line, the veteran Libyan infantry, who had been held in reserve, wheeled inward and slammed into the exposed flanks of the packed legions. The shock was absolute. For a Roman legionary, the sudden appearance of what looked like a fresh Roman legion on his unprotected flank was fatally disorienting. The final piece of the trap fell into place. Hasdrubal, having routed the cavalry on the wing, showed incredible discipline. He rallied his horsemen, led them on a wide arc behind the entire Roman army, and crashed into the rear of the helpless infantry. The encirclement was complete. The largest army Rome had ever fielded was now completely surrounded, packed into a killing field of Hannibal's own design. The battle was over. The slaughter was about to begin. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a methodical industrial process of killing. The Roman legions, compressed into a vast, panicked mass, lost all cohesion. For the men in the center, the final hours were an agony of listening as the sounds of slaughter drew closer. Hannibal's men worked their way inwards, a ring of iron and death closing in on its victims. The consul Aemilius Paullus, who had fought bravely, was cut down and killed. By nightfall, the losses were catastrophic, with some sources claiming as many as 70,000 Romans were killed or captured. As Hannibal surveyed his victory, his cavalry commander Hannibal urged him to march on Rome immediately. When Hannibal hesitated, Hannibal allegedly retorted, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use one." Whether this was Hannibal's greatest blunder is one of history's great debates. His goal was political, to break Rome's alliances, not destroy the city itself. He had won the perfect battle, but the war was far from over. The true story of Cannae is not what Hannibal won, but what Rome refused to lose. In its darkest hour, the Republic did not surrender. It refused to ransom prisoners. It raised new legions from slaves and criminals and returned to the Fabian strategy with a vengeance. Hannibal's tactical masterpiece became a strategic failure. The battle is still studied today as the perfect trap, but its ultimate lesson is one of resilience, that the true strength of a nation is not found in a single victory, but in its unbreakable will to endure. If you want to learn more about the incredible conflicts of the ancient world, make sure you subscribe to see what's next. And let us know in the comments which historical battle you want to see us cover in the future. Thanks for watching.